My name is Logan, and this happened when I was about 10 years old. It was late May, and the Friday after school let out. My mom said that if I brought home straight A's, we could all go night fishing at High Falls Lake, the one behind the dam that nobody uses after the ski boats are done for the day. My dad promised that the crappie would be stacked like cordwood under the lights. We left the house just after 6. Dad's pickup smelled like minnows and a pine tree air freshener that stopped working about 2 years ago. I had my Spider-Man fishing rod and a Walmart bag full of sour gummy worms that I wasn't supposed to open until we got there. Mom had packed us some waters, beef jerky, and those little powdered sugar donuts that get white dust everywhere. When we got there, the parking lot was empty except for one truck way down at the dark end, an old silver Chevy with a flat tire. It also didn't have a license plate. My dad glanced at it and said that it looked like somebody's broken down piece of junk. Then we parked as far away from it as we could, but we had to walk by it just to get to the trail. The walk to our spot always feels longer when the sun's going down. Mom and Dad carried the fishing gear and the camping chairs. My job was the snacks. It had rained earlier that day, so every time I took a step that found a puddle, the water splashed up my shins and soaked my socks. Looking back though, I'm pretty sure I was doing it on purpose. We had set up on the big flat granite shelf Dad likes to call the porch. He jammed a giant stick into the mud, in which he hung the first lantern. The light from it poured straight down into 8 feet of water and turned it a bright, ghostly green. The other lantern he put behind us on the bank so we could see the immediate area and do things like tie fishhooks and eat snacks. Within 10 minutes, the crappie were thumping. I caught 4 of them fairly quickly. The biggest one was about 11 inches. They would flash silver every time they came close to the surface. Dad clipped them onto a stringer and anchored it with a rock so that they would swim in place. By 9 o'clock, the moon looked like a fat orange coin hanging over the trees from the far side. We could see the whole lake. It was a half-mile across. It looked like black glass with our little puddle of light inside of it. Nothing moved anywhere, just the bugs ticking against the lantern globe and the soft plop of our bobbers. Then everything stopped. Even the crickets quit at the same exact second. The first scream came from across the bank, straight across from us. It started off high-pitched like a woman. Then it cracked into something lower and more raw, like an animal that had learned how to scream like a human. The sound of it rolled over the water and punched us in the chest. It even seemed as if my bobber froze mid-bobble. My mom's hand clamped my shoulder so hard that I felt her nails through my t-shirt. There was 10 full seconds of silence. Then it came again. This time it was closer and louder. It ended in a wet choke like someone tried to scream with a mouthful of water. Dad killed the lantern on the bank. My whole world dropped to just that green cone shining down into the lake. He stared across the water and cursed under his breath. He whispered, "That's the North Shore. That's the way home." My mom's voice was tiny. "We have to walk right past it, baby. There's no other way." My dad switched both lanterns onto the red mode, and everything turned to the color of blood. He told me to reel in my line real slow and quiet. My hands were shaking so bad that it seemed to take forever. My mom grabbed the stringer. The 4 crappie were still alive. Their gills were flaring, and their eyes were big and silver in the red light. We started walking north. My dad went first, then me, then my mom behind me with her fingers twisted into the back of my shirt. The trail was narrow, only about 10 inches in places. The lake was on the left, and a wall of pines were on the right. Every footstep sounded like fireworks. 5 minutes into our walk, we heard crying, soft and hiccupy, the way my 3-year-old cousin cries when he's pretending he's hurt so that you'll pick him up. It was coming from ahead, maybe 200 yards. Then it stopped, like it suddenly noticed we were nearby. My dad stopped so fast that I walked into his back. I think he smelled it first. It was Coleman camp fuel. It was sharp, like when my grandfather would light the camp stove. We crept forward. The trail dipped down until we were only about 8 or 9 feet above the water. That's when we actually saw the lantern. It was an old-style green Coleman, sitting on the stump right at the edge of the water, the mantle glowing a bright white, hissing loud in the surrounding silence. I remember noticing that the glass looked too clean. There was no soot, like it had just been taken out of the box. In the mud, directly in front of it, were footprints. They looked like a child's, except they were actual footprints, as in whatever made these was not wearing any shoes, and they were really small and narrow, maybe like a size 2 or 3. The weird thing was that they were coming straight out of the lake. Water still puddled in them. The footprints came up the bank, stopped at the stump, then turned sharp into the woods. We looked around, but there was no kid, no shoes. There was no sound, except for the hiss from the lantern. We only walked about 10 more yards when we heard that distinct sound of somebody stepping on and snapping a twig behind us. My mom's breath hitched. She yanked backward so hard that my heels slipped off the trail and I almost went into the water. Dad clicked our red lights off immediately. We were in total blackness. I couldn't see my own fingers in front of my face. We stood there. I counted my heartbeats. 1, 2, 27, 28. Then the Coleman's flame shrank. It popped and went dark, and the hiss died with it. My dad whispered into my ear, "Run. Do not look back. Run." We all ran. Branches clawed at my cheeks. My shoes slipped on the pine needles. Mom was right behind me, and I could hear the crappie on the stringer slapping her leg. Somewhere I dropped my Spider-Man fishing rod, and I heard it clatter, and then something broke it. We exploded into the parking lot. Our truck was still there, but the Chevy was gone. Dad hit the unlock button 3 times before the lights flashed. He threw the back door open and we dove in. Me first, then Mom second, still clutching the bloody stringer, but 2 of the fish had come off. Dad slammed the door and jumped into the driver's seat and locked all of the doors. He turned the key, but there was nothing, just a dead click. He tried again. Click. Then the 3rd time, the engine finally coughed. It caught and roared. He put it in drive and floored it towards the gate. The gate that had always been open wide as long as I remembered was now chained shut with a thick silver master lock that glinted in the headlights. Dad never even hit the brakes. We must have hit that gate doing 50 miles an hour. It snapped with a sound like a gunshot and whipped over the roof. We didn't speak until we hit the highway. My mom finally looked back and started crying. The remaining 2 crappie were dead on the floor mat. My dad reached over and killed the radio. Then he said the only thing he said the whole ride home. Whatever that was, it already knows which truck was ours. It was the last Saturday of archery-only season. I was hunting in the Okmulgee Wildlife Management Area, which is in the middle of Georgia. It was hot, 78 degrees at dawn, and the mosquitoes were still thick. I'd parked at the check station on Coley Creek Road and signed the logbook at 4:50 a.m. There were only 2 other trucks there, both guys I recognized from previous years. I hiked about 2 miles up to the little saddle where 2 ridges pinched together. It was the perfect funnel. At around 6:40 in the evening, I was easing along the downside when I first saw him. A skinny guy, mid-30s, wearing some Walmart camo that still had the creases in it. He was dragging a fat doe by the back legs. There was no orange anywhere, no backpack, no bow or gun that I could see, just a headlamp around his neck and a cheap fixed blade knife on his belt. The deer was dripping as if it had just been shot minutes earlier. I dropped behind the blowdown. Using my rangefinder, I pegged him at 187 yards. I started taking photos with my phone zoomed all the way in. I got 3 clear shots of his face. That's when I noticed the doe didn't have an arrow in her. It looked like a .22 hole right behind the shoulder. This definitely wasn't legal. I texted my wife. "Poacher dragging doe on Okmulgee. I have pictures." heading down to get the truck plate. I verified that it went through with only 2 bars of service. I started my way downhill, making sure to stay in the shadows. It took me maybe 8 minutes to cover 200 yards. That's when I heard it. Brush popping hard right behind me, coming fast. I turned around and there was a different guy. He had the same cheap camo, but he was heavier and had a beard. He was jogging the exact line I just walked. And in his left hand was my blaze orange pack cover that I had hung on a branch to mark the ridge for the evening walk out. He stopped about 25 yards upslope. He was already breathing hard, but he was just staring at me. His right hand was behind his thigh. I couldn't see what he was holding, but the way he kept it there made my stomach drop. He smiled and he said real slow, "You, by yourself out here tonight, buddy?" I lied through my teeth. I told him that my brother's glassing the next ridge with the truck and that he'll be here in 5 minutes. He nodded like he believed me. Then he said, "Cool. Then you won't mind turning around and walking north till you hit the road. I'll be right behind you." I figured I'd play it safe. Yeah, I had my bow, but I'm pretty sure he had a gun. So I did exactly that. I walked about a mile north towards the road, and the whole way he was only about 20 yards back. I never saw the first guy again. And when I finally hit the fire brake, my truck was gone. The chain on the gate was cut clean with bolt cutters. I spun around to say something, but now the second man was gone. I had to walk another 4 miles in the dark on that dusty clay road before a pulpwood truck finally stopped. I didn't get home until about 1:20 in the morning. My truck turned up 3 weeks later, burned to the frame in Twiggs County. The Department of Natural Resources found the doe about 2 weeks later, gutted and left to rot. The maggots were already thick. And it was like these people weren't even trying to hide. The authorities recovered a bullet from the doe. It was a .22, just like I suspected. And near the doe, they found boot prints that were size 12 lugs. It was a match for prints found at an incident the year before where 2 guys beat a hunter with a flashlight and took his rifle in the same wildlife management area. I still hunt Okmulgee, but now I carry a .40 Smith & Wesson on my chest, and I never leave anything orange that can be used to backtrack me. Some people aren't out there just for the deer. My Uncle Rick drew a quota hunt from Rum Creek, opening morning rifle, November 2023. He was 58, 5'9", and pushing 300 pounds. He chewed Red Man like it was food, and drank a pot of Folgers every morning. And usually, that coffee had some Jameson added to it for some flavor. I usually go out with him, but since I had started a new job working overnights at a warehouse, I couldn't get the day off. And since my shift ended at 7, I wouldn't be able to make it out there for the morning hunt. He left his house around 3:45 a.m. He stopped at a Chevron on Highway 18 for coffee and a honey bun, and then he got to the check-in at Rum Creek Station at 4:30. At 5:47, he sent me a text. Along with the coordinates of his stand, he said, "Big 8-pointer just grunted and walked right under the stand. Waiting till 6:30 to shoot. Love you, bud." And that was it. I was expecting to hear back by 8. I started worrying when he didn't answer at 9. And by 10, I was driving the logging roads looking for his white Ford F-150. I found it at the dead end on Turkey Trot Trail, right where I expected it to be. The tailgate was down, the cooler still iced, and the hood of the truck was still cold. His hang-on stand was a Millennium M100, locked onto a water oak about 150 yards off the road. The fastest way in was through some thick mud, but I made it up there in about 15 minutes, and I will never forget what I found. He was still in his seat, head slumped forward, his chin on his chest. The harness, a trophy-lined covert light, had done its job. He hadn't fallen. His Remington 270 was leaning against the shooting rail with the safety on. His lips were already blue. A thin line of dark blood had run from his nostril, down over his beard, and was dripping all the way onto the ground. Droplets that had scattered onto the dead leaves below. The plywood floor of the stand was slick with it. We had tried everything, but we couldn't unbuckle his harness without dropping 280 pounds straight down onto the rocks. We couldn't lift him high enough to get a rope under his arms. Cell service was at one bar and kept cutting out. I finally got through to 911 just after 11. Jones County Fire didn't have a ladder truck that would fit down the trail, so they brought the Stokes basket and side-by-sides. It took them about 3 hours to get there from the time I called, and all that time, my Uncle Rick just hung there, eyes half open, staring at nothing, swaying back and forth a couple inches every time the wind would gust. The blood kept dripping. You could follow the drops all the way down the tree trunk like some kind of horror breadcrumb trail. The coroner had said that he had a massive heart attack and was probably dead before he even knew what hit him. We buried him in his favorite camo. I still have the coordinates pinned on my GPS, saved as Rick's Last Stand. Every time I scroll past it, I feel sick. Now when I go hunting, I always bring my GPS that is able to use the same satellites to send text messages. I always text my wife the coordinates of the exact tree every single time I climb, because nobody should hang there for 5 hours while their family tries to figure out how to cut them down.